In a quiet rural town, where land is legacy and fences mark more than boundaries, one family finds themselves at the center of a battle they never asked for. What begins as an ordinary morning quickly spirals into a clash of power, pride, and the fight to protect what's rightfully theirs. This is the story of the Carters of justice, defiance, and the line they refuse to let anyone cross. The morning mist still clung to the edges of the fields when Mason Carter stepped out with a bucket of feed in one hand and his phone in the other. The sun barely kissed the horizon, casting soft gold across the chicken coop and the weathered fence line. For Mason, 17, it was routine wake early. Feed the chickens. Check the property line his father always said to keep an eye on. That's when he saw them, two men in crisp, unfamiliar security uniforms standing at the far end of their land near the split-rail fence. They weren't locals. Mason felt it instantly in the way they moved, like they owned the ground they stood on. "You can't be here," one of them called out as Mason approached. "This property is under Lakewood Estates jurisdiction now." Mason blinked. "What are you talking about? This is our land." The second man stepped forward. "You're trespassing." "Hands where we can see them." That's when Mason hit record. Wyatt Carter had lived on that land for over 30 years. The farmhouse had been in his family for 2 generations. He knew every inch of the soil, every dip in the fence, every oak tree that shaded the hill where his wife was buried. When Mason burst into the house, pale and shaking but steady-handed with his phone, Wyatt didn't ask questions. He didn't need to. He grabbed his jacket, stepped into his boots, and drove down to the southern boundary line. He found the men still there, now posturing like sheriffs. "I don't know who the hell you think you are," Wyatt barked, "but you've got about 10 seconds to get off my land." They didn't move. Lakewood HOA recently extended its boundaries. "You're in violation of several codes." "Save it," Wyatt snapped. "This land has never belonged to your damn HOA, and I've got the county deeds to prove it." One of the men smirked. "Maybe you didn't get the memo." Wyatt's eyes narrowed. He wasn't a man who raised his voice unless it was needed. "Touch my son again, and you'll be leaving here in handcuffs." That afternoon, Karen Wright pulled up in her black Lexus, stepping out with a folder the size of a legal brief and the smugness of someone who had never lost a fight. She didn't knock, just marched up the porch like she owned the place. "Mr. Carter," she smiled. "Let's not make this harder than it needs to be." Wyatt crossed his arms. Mason stood behind him, still shaken. "You sent your goons to threaten my son." "Security officers," she corrected. "And according to our new map, your land is officially within Lakewood Estates jurisdiction. You're subject to community regulations, property appearance, noise levels, livestock, fencing. Oh, and chickens, absolutely not." "Ma'am," Wyatt said slowly, "this land was bought in 1992. I have original, signed, notarized deeds from the county office. You can't redraw lines on a whim." Karen slid a paper across the porch table. "You'll find everything's in order. The board voted on the annexation last month." Mason leaned in, eyes wide. "That's not even a legal map. It's a sketch." Karen's eyes flicked to him. "Children don't dictate law, sweetheart." Wyatt stepped forward, bristling. "This conversation is over." Karen smiled again, crueler this time. "Refuse compliance, and we'll proceed with fines. If those go unpaid, we'll file for eviction." Courts take HOA violations seriously these days. But Wyatt didn't flinch. "And I suppose your sketch map will hold up in front of a judge." Karen shrugged. "That's not up to me. That's up to our lawyers." By evening, word had spread. Small-town news traveled like fire through dry brush, and Lakewood's growing HOA disputes had already caused tension among longtime residents. Some whispered about wrongful fines and bullied elders. Others feared speaking up. But Wyatt wasn't built for silence. He and Mason drove into town first thing the next morning. At the courthouse, the clerk recognized Wyatt immediately. She pulled his file without hesitation, land records, dated and verified, with clear boundary lines that placed the Carter farm outside Lakewood Estates. Mason posted the video online that same day. Within hours, it was viral among the local Facebook groups. HOA goons harass teen on his own land. Karen Wright returned this time with 3 board members in tow and a photographer snapping pictures of the Carter house like it was a crime scene. Wyatt didn't answer the door. He called the sheriff. When Sheriff Carter Reynolds arrived, his cruiser barely cooled before he stepped out. Hand on his hip. Karen, we've talked about this. She flipped open her binder. They're refusing compliance, because they don't have to comply, the sheriff said evenly. I reviewed the footage, and the county confirms the Carter land is not part of your jurisdiction. Karen's expression twisted. They're obstructing the HOA's mission. The sheriff tilted his head. Your mission better not include unlawful detainment, harassment, or forged annexation documents, because that's what this looks like. Karen blanched, but recovered. You can't prove we'll let the courts decide that. Wyatt cut in. And trust me, we're not backing down. The lawsuit was filed within a week. The charges: harassment, trespassing, unlawful attempt to annex property, and emotional distress. Mason's video was entered as evidence. Karen's documents unraveled under scrutiny. The HOA's vote invalid. The annexation never filed with the county. The map, drawn by a board member's cousin, in court. Karen tried to spin the narrative, claimed it was all a misunderstanding, that the HOA was simply acting to protect property values. But the judge wasn't swayed. In the end, the Carter family won not just compensation, but something far more important: precedent. Karen Wright was forced to step down. Several board members resigned in disgrace. The HOA was fined and barred from expanding its borders without a formal, transparent vote and legal review. But Wyatt knew better than to relax. That night, he stood with Mason on the porch, watching the last light dip below the trees. The farm was quiet, peaceful again, but something had shifted. You think she'll try again? Mason asked. She might, Wyatt said, lighting his pipe. People like her don't go away easy. But next time, she won't find us unprepared. Mason nodded, then hesitated. You ever think about selling? Wyatt looked out at the land at the hills, the coop, the fence line where it all started. Not once. He slung an arm over Mason's shoulder. This land isn't just dirt. It's roots. It's your mom's memory. It's us. They stood in silence as night settled around them, deeper and stronger than before. The Carter land wasn't just outside the HOA's reach. It was untouchable.